Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about the movie Black Bear starring Aubrey Plaza. There aren't going to be any spoilers in the end of this video. If you like videos about movies, books and TV shows, please feel free to like and subscribe. So this movie is split into two parts, and in part one we see the character Allison, played by Aubrey, a film director who arrives at a lake house to stay with a couple, Blair and Gabe. The couple are artists. Gabe is a musician and Blair is a dancer, but they struggled quite a bit in the city, so they decided to come to this cabin which belongs to Gabe's mother and had been in his family for generations, and they kind of plan on opening the place up to artists from time to time. Blair points out that Allison is difficult to read, and we'll find out in part one that this is kind of an understatement. Blair's an actress turned movie director who has come to the house for some inspiration because she's suffering from writer's block, and we're constantly trying to figure her out. She lies about everything and you just don't know what's real about her or what isn't. You don't even know whether she's lying or not. I guess that's the point, that she wants to see people kind of struggle to figure her out. And her manipulation, for lack of a better word, is so effortless, but you sense it. You just can't quite put your finger on it. The vibe between all three is immediately uncomfortable. When they're alone, Gabe and Allison seem to be doing what I can only describe as passive-aggressive flirting. She seems annoyed by his attention, but at the same time, she enjoys getting to kind of swat away at it, but not in a clear way that communicates that she's not interested. She still courts it. She seems to figure out quite quickly that her playful combativeness with Gabe gets his attention, and so she really leans into it. Allison also has a kind of I'm not like other girls vibe with Blair, and she's also nice in a way that just doesn't really seem sincere, and Blair's almost immediately threatened, or at the very least she's wary, as we all are. What's strange is that Allison is such a quietly disruptive force in this relationship between Blair and Gabe, because she doesn't actually say much, but what is revealed is just kind of a resentment that the couple seems to have for one another, just bubbling under the surface, and this is the most fascinating and uncomfortable part of part one. There's just so much tension between them, barely concealed, and you're just waiting for the part where this couple will just have it out with one another to kind of put you and them out of this misery. Obviously, their problems existed long before Allison's arrival, but watching Gabe trying to impress Allison and Blair trying to cap Gabe at the knees to try and embarrass him in front of Allison, all the while Allison just sits and watches, is pretty fascinating to see play out. Well, it's not actually that Allison doesn't say anything. She does often just watch the couple bicker, but when she does say something, it seems to either cause more tension between them, and I'm not sure if this is intentional or not, because the couple is quite preoccupied with one-upping each other that anything could possibly set them off at this point. So at their uncomfortable dinner, Blair almost gleefully points out that Gabe only earned 30 cents in royalties, and he's passively aggressively scolding her about having wine while pregnant, which would be understandable, but he's rather smug and self-righteous, so there's no one to really like here at first. Of course, Allison is watching all of this unfold, weighing in at moments, but yeah, it seems like she enjoys this, or at the very least, she's fascinated by them. As the evening wears on, Gabe laments the loss of tradition, religion, and family, and he thinks that this is why society is so miserable, that we've lost meaning. Blair has no patience for this and basically kind of calls him an incel, that he's speaking from his own insecurities, and she isn't wrong. We see Gabe kind of has this chip on his shoulder when it comes to his identity as a musician, because he hasn't seen any commercial success and he himself is a little lost and unhappy. He seems to maybe find comfort in projecting that, in seeing this as a societal issue as opposed to a personal one. At this point, the conversation has become a screaming match, but it's almost a relief to see the repressed rage come out. Unsurprisingly, Allison slips into different roles here, siding with Gabe and pretending that she's not a feminist, but when it suits her, she sides with Blair in her performative kind of condescending way. Eventually, Alison does admit that she's been lying about everything, including her mother's death, about having a husband, and her and Gabe become closer and they end up making out. Blair catches them and she's obviously livid because Gabe has been low-key trying to impress her all along. And of course, this is all happening as Alison is watching from outside the window, never quite getting mixed up in the chaos that she played a part in sowing. But of course, reality, whatever that means in this movie, sets in, and part 1 ends with them driving in a panic to the hospital and getting into an accident. So, silly me, by the end of part 1, I only realized that if there were to be a villain of this piece, it's definitely Gabe. Sure, Alison shows up and she's kind of strange, she kind of plays around with them, but she's only exposing something that's already there, obviously, and it's Gabe, and we'll see this as well in the second part, who kind of gaslights his partners, and he just keeps pushing until there's an inevitable implosion, and then that's when he switches to being, you know, the nice guy again and making promises. And I guess when you're dealing with something like this, you can't really blame Blair for wanting to bring him down a notch at a dinner with a stranger. In part 2, we see that there is actually a movie production now happening at the lake house. Alison is an actress in the movie, and Gabe, who is now her husband, is the director. And we see that she's pretty miserable, having to do so many takes. She's tired, stressed, upset, and Gabe is kind of verbally abusive to her. He's still a bit of a pretentious arsehole in the second part, and we find out shortly after that Blair is also an actress in this movie, and while Alison is shooting the scene, Gabe tells Blair that the way that he treats Alison makes her a better artist. So his abuse of her brings out the emotion that he wants to see in her performance. Since the director is one of the main people making the creative decisions, the actor often has to trust them, and herein lies the problem with Gabe and Alison. She has to trust his vision for the movie, no matter how outrageous his demands are, but eventually she does submit because the success or failure of this endeavor affects a whole team of people. As if this isn't really exploitative enough, Gabe and Blair decide that they're going to pretend to have an affair. They even go as far as messing up each other's hair and planning to leave the room in a way that's timed to make Alison suspicious. This is all to bring out that performance in Alison that Gabe wants. At this point, we're not actually sure of what the link is between part 1 and part 2 of the movie. The switching of roles is just presented, and I kind of wonder if part 1 was also part of an earlier draft of a movie that got scrapped. We do see though that part 2 is a movie within a movie. Alison looks pretty lonely and unhappy already, but when the fake affair plan between Gabe and Blair works, she's rightly upset and she storms off and gets drunk. This is extremely stressful because this is the final day of shooting and there is a whole production crew who wants to wrap, so there's something of a collective effort to sober her up. Obviously, because Gabe is the worst, when his plan works but simultaneously backfires, he puts this on Alison, telling her that he knew that the movie was going to ruin them, but that Alison insisted that she be in it. So he basically pushes Alison towards an emotional breakdown, and even in the midst of this, he makes her feel guilty for acting this way. So I won't reveal what happens in the end, but towards the end there is this final scene that Alison has to act in, but because her emotions are still really raw at this point, the lines become blurred between what is performance and what is real, and I guess this is the theme of the second part. At this point, it actually occurred to me that even the drunken meltdown wasn't really Gabe's plan backfiring. These were the lengths that he was willing to go to get the performance that he wanted, pushing her to the absolute brink, just like he did with Blair in part 1, and then in the end he's the one that gets to save them and be the good guy who wants to fix everything. And yeah, that's basically the movie. So I'm a huge fan of Aubrey Plaza, and I shouldn't have been surprised that she is good in a movie, but she really blew me away with her performance in this, and I'm not even really sure that I completely understood it. Christopher Abbott, whose career I've been following since Girls, was really good, and the actress who played Blair, Sarah Gadon, I'm going to have to look for some of her work because I'm not familiar with her, but she was really good as well. This movie isn't really my genre. I likely wouldn't have seen it if not for Aubrey, but I would recommend it. It is a good movie. Anyway, that's it for the video. Please feel free to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.